Welcome to Tea Time with Shaylee and Amber. I'm Shaylee Evans, and I'm a life coach for pets and their people. I'm a truth seeker, and it's my passion to empower others and to give animals a voice along the way.
I'm Amber Leidick, and I've been a performance horse trainer focused on behavioral issues for over 20 years. My current passion is creating impactful in-person and online events and collaborating with professionals to be on the leading edge of positive change in the horse industry.
We are two friends invested in theta healing, belief system work, animal communication, and any resources that benefit human-animal partnerships. So turn up the volume and let's dive into the Great Awakening, brought to you by Our Horses. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We are super excited to be chatting with you today about a hot topic. Well, it's a hot topic in my life right now, and Amber's been coaching me through it over the last hour because I brought it up also in our membership. I am dabbling into the idea of forgiveness, and how did it all started with back pain and my endeavors in uncovering my back pain and me immediately being like, okay, where did this come from? Where did it start? Identifying a source, realizing that I was blaming said source for my back pain. And then I was like, huh, that's interesting. Like I'm blaming something outside of myself for something that I feel inside of myself. I wonder where that's coming from.
Mhm.
And then I did a meditation, and the lady in the meditation told a little story, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it's basically like two prisoners of war got together and one asked the other, have you forgiven our captors yet? And he said no. And the person who asked him said, well, then I guess you're still captive, aren't you? And that like really struck a chord with me because it made me think about how much I give my power away to certain past experiences where it just kind of became part of who I am, but I never fully processed it. Like I kind of just have had the mindset of like, oh, time will heal all wounds. Or maybe I thought I processed it and I didn't. And then I started, so she had like this prompt where she was like, start to call in situations where you're holding yourself apart from yourself. And immediately one situation came into my experience and I was like, nope, not that one. Is there another one that I can use? And that one just like kept, I was like, can't I use Kip? Because like Kip was like my second go-to where I was like, oh, there's been plenty of experiences where I could feel guilty about that. Like that's where I'm going to go. And my mind was like, no, you're going to choose this specific experience with a human that you're still holding on to. And then I got down this rabbit hole of like, do I even know what forgiveness is? And the first prompt that she had was forgiving yourself. So I was thinking about the scenario and I was like, okay, like what do I need to forgive myself for? And ultimately, I struggled with that because I didn't want to be wrong, because being wrong meant I failed to keep up my part of the relationship or I failed in some way. And also, I didn't want to forgive because I didn't want to be wrong in the sense of like invalidating my feelings. Like, I was like, I felt what I felt at the time and I needed to feel that. And therefore, I can't forgive. But where do I want to go with that? Actually.
I actually, I, bel- I agree, right? And we just talked about this, where it's like you can't really be deeply compassionate, or I shouldn't say that. You can only be forgiving and compassionate and give a level of grace to others that you can first give to yourself. And I think sometimes there is this sense of, am I even worthy of forgiveness because of the way we've been raised? I think a common theme with human beings in general is this sense of not enoughness. I think everybody has something that they don't feel worthy of, or where that shows up in their life. And so my first thing that I think of is the forgiving doesn't necessarily equal I am saying what happened to me was right or wrong, or it should or should not have happened. It's more of, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel, and this was my response to it. Am I judging the thing that happened, and am I judging how I responded? So if we completely remove right and wrong, which I love to do because right and wrong immediately elicits judgment. It elicits comparison and
Hmm.
elicits all of these things that make it really sticky for us to move through this, where it's if there was no right or wrong, if there was just the scenarios that happened and how they made us feel and the way we responded, could we say, from the place that I'm at now, I would have responded differently and I can recognize that and I can acknowledge it. Um, could the situation have been different if you're calling your power back, looking at the scenario that has happened that is re-triggering you and saying, if I was there now from what I know now, would this situation have even happened, or would I be able to integrate the version of me now into that scenario and nipped it in the bud? So I think the first thing is like completely removing right or wrong. Just saying, let's just take that out of the equation. And then all you have left is the what isness of. And I think that makes it easier to give yourself grace around the scenario because you can recognize, well, my response was just off of a thing that happened, where I was at, how it made that version of me feel. The version of me now may have not felt that way or may have responded differently. And I can hold space for all of that. And then within that, because there's no judgment, you kind of are forced. You're kind of forced to let it go. You know what I mean? If there's no resistance to that, it's like, oh, there's just all this isness happening around me. Um, and I feel like if people out there are wanting to hold on to it, then that just means there's this place where I'm not free in my life if I'm holding on to this thing and I really want to like dissect it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at it. But if you can still look at all of that, where it started, you can even go there. We talk about finding that like the beginning, that root cause of it. When's the first time that, I didn't want to be wrong because it felt like a threat to me to be wrong. Like if I was wrong, something really bad was going to happen, or I would be disconnected from love, from safety, from whatever, then of course your nervous system is going to want to have a death grip on that right or wrong because that's ultimately what your child brain or whatever level you were or age you were at when you had that thought or that experience, your nervous system will hold on to that. So you can even give yourself grace there and going, yeah, this is my body's response to a situation that was really hard. And just goes back into that same formula of, what was the situation? What was the version of me? How it was handled? How did it make me feel? And like, could I do it different now from where I'm at? And it's like, oh yeah, I probably could. And I think it lightens it and it releases some of that resistance around everything.
Yeah, I like that because the right and wrong totally brings me into like guilt and shame. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh God, because if I'm wrong, then I feel guilty about what I did or what I said. And then I feel shameful for going against whatever, whatever. And something that you said earlier, when we were talking to our members is you were saying, I can't remember the context, but you were like, I don't, what, I'm gonna butcher this. Talk about the thing where you were like, I don't think you can handle this. That's like essentially
Oh,
being apart from yourself, right? So by changing who you are because you're having to tiptoe, and that I guess that was the context is
hmm.
we were talking about how versions we change, we become different versions of ourselves, and sometimes we outgrow other people and they outgrow us, and that's okay. And you basically saying by not being true and authentic and trying to, I don't think you said save feelings, but it was like somewhere along the lines of I don't think you can handle.
Yeah. I think how it mutated from this conversation into that was really this like if I'm not judging myself, if I'm not making myself right or wrong in any scenario, and it was tied into a situation I had with a friend of mine who, I don't have hate for, resentment for, or any ill feelings towards. I just don't hang around her anymore. And it stemmed from when I started living the most authentic version of myself, wanting to celebrate wins, wanting to talk about hard things, wanting to just say where I was at when we were together. Um, because if I was living in, because I was living in that space of there is no right or wrong. Like, this isn't a competition between me and you. This is just me having my experience and wanting to share. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is happening. I wasn't able to do that in the presence of this person because it was taken the wrong way. There was offense. It was like, oh, you're boasting, you're And I then said, okay, well, I now in my brain was like, if I want to stay connected, if I want to stay loved, if I want to stay in relationship with this person, and this is like across the board, almost every relationship I had up until recently, then I have to be this version of myself or this version of myself because they can't handle the fully embodied version of me. Or um instead, if you think of it as if the fully authentic embodied version of me is triggering you, that's for you to figure out. You know what I mean? And so for me to want to filter that, that's basically me saying, I don't think you can handle this version of me. I don't, I think I need to be careful around you. Like you're fragile, like you can't understand what I'm saying. So, it just puts people, it's almost like you're treating people like victims and not consciously, but that is the energy behind it. Like, oh, okay, well, I need to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm this half version, oh, dragonfly, half version of myself so that I don't hurt your feelings or I don't, like, I'm dumbing myself down to make sure we're taking care of you, you fragile butterfly that can't help being, doesn't want to get hurt and doesn't want to get triggered. And so you're almost disempowering the people around you when you are watering yourself down instead of like maybe the relationship doesn't thrive and they get to say this isn't working for me or I get and what I had said was is it was making me want to fall into an old version of myself so that I could stay connected. And when I recognize that that's just my anxious attachment style flourishing in certain relationships, um that's my responsibility. So my decision was if I can't be fully embodied and authentic in relationships with people, then I'm going to move them to the outer circle. The little example that you gave earlier, where it's like, you don't have to be mad about it. You don't have to, cut people out completely, but like, where are they? And how often am I going to see or hang out with these people? And knowing that the people you hang out with really does affect your experience on this planet. It affects your energy. So, yeah, safeguarding that it's not right or wrong. That is just you caring about yourself, your experience, your health, and your well-being. So, by making those decisions, you're choosing you, which we all know that that goes right into, well, that's so selfish of you. Is it though? It's not. Because the people that get the most embodied authentic version of me get permission to do that for themselves in the relationship. It becomes a safe place for everyone to be able to do that. So I feel like that's more impactful and more important than, me trying to water myself down to stay connected with people because there's such a long history. Like that's not, I don't think that, time is made up anyways, right? So, so yes, there's a long history and I could appreciate that, but I just don't do edited versions of myself anymore. So I don't make that their responsibility.
Oh gosh, I need to listen to this episode. Because I feel like I've been talking about this lately where I'm like, oh, I feel like there is the animal communicator version of me, and then there's the me who is free to maybe sometimes like have emotion. And I feel like I'm like a very playful, energetic, friendly person. And it's so weird how I have developed this belief system since I've become an animal communicator that like I have to be this like unwavering little wealth of knowledge who is always studying and doesn't ever come off. It's not that I feel like I can't come out of balance, but it's like I definitely can't do anything that will like invalidate myself to others. And then I'm like, well, what does that even mean? And then I'm like, oh, well, I can't cry in front of others because that's sketch. And no one will like
Even
believe
though
me that I
like
could talk to animals if I cry.
even though we literally like are telling people constantly that like yes, feel your feelings, let them flow through. Like not me, but you.
Not me, but you. I know. It's so interesting. And I think it's because I'm deep in this place of compassion where I'm learning compassion for others. And I will say I don't feel like I grew up in a super compassionate household in a sense. And the first compassion that I started learning was in my adulthood about horses. And it was like, being more mindful about the way you handle them, the way you interact with them. And so my horses, especially Biggie, because he is strong enough to say no to me. Kip kind of would just let me bulldoze over him, and Biggie was like, "Listen, they call me Biggie for a reason." Um, he has taught me a lot about compassion. Bro taught me a lot about compassion, and now I'm learning it in the human world, and it's so interesting to navigate it. And also being someone who I've always said that I was just non-emotional, but now I realize that I'm so freaking sensitive that I've created this non-emotional version of myself so that I can avoid being sensitive. And when I interact with people and I start to feel emotions, it's so weird how I think about the times where I didn't have compassion because I just didn't know, like I didn't know the compassion. And I do it to myself all the time where I'll say like, you know, you chose that. Like I was telling in our group that I have back pain right now, and I was unloading hay and I was like, oh gosh, my back. And I was like, shut up, you chose this life, you chose to have horses, tough through it, like you're not allowed to complain about your back. And I was like, oh my gosh, there it is, that little inner critic that's like, no, you're not okay as you are, you're not allowed to feel the way you feel, like sit down, shut up, do the right thing. Like, and I was always that energy, like go to school, go to the gym, like do what, and I lived a very mechanical lifestyle. So it's so interesting to me to start dabbling into like the emotional side of things because um there's a lot of unknown with that. Like when it starts, when does it stop? How intense is it gonna be?
You know, it's interesting because you talk about those like the masks, right? So you were saying there's this like animal communicator version of you, and then there's like the real you. And I think that I that came up for me a lot over the last couple of weeks because I've been doing a lot of like family things. And then one was going to a family that I did not know and meeting them. And I was I was saying that I was like, I don't think I'm very friendly. And um and then I was like, but am I friendly? And I started like kind of asking these questions. And people that know me are like, yeah, you're so friendly, you're so nice, you're so you are compassionate, you're empathetic, all the things. But it's like I think there's this like it takes a lot of energy from me to be that present and then hold that space. So on the off time, I feel like I just want to like if I go out, like I'm not smiling at everyone necessarily all the time, or I'm not going out of my way to ask questions. Here's where it fucking started, okay? I'm dating somebody who should have his own podcast because the questions he asks me, like, and everyone, it's like he really, really cares about the answer and you can feel it. And I feel like I have so much going on in my own life, and then I go out into the real world and I don't have the capacity to like care almost. So when I ask the questions, I feel like, oh, like, yeah, it just, did you hear my voice? I'm gonna
Oh
have
yeah.
a voice session where she identifies your voice masks. But right there, when I even talked about going and talking to someone else, I went up into my like receptionist voice. I'm like, hey, how are you doing?
Your
It's
higher
like,
octave.
where are you? Like, why did you just sound like that? Because it's not authentic, and I would rather not talk to people than try to be polite because I feel like they're gonna feel it anyways. So it's this like weird thing I'm trying to like figure out how to do. And then I was just like, oh my God, I'm not nice. I'm not a nice person. And then I went into this whole shamey thing where I was like, I wish I was nicer. And then, yeah, it was a mess. But that was my whole thing of like, I don't know. So yeah,
Well,
it was
sometimes
kind
I
of,
think that's comparison too. We get stuck
yeah.
in the comparison because I will be like that sometimes where I'll meet someone who's like really nice and I'll be like, "Oh, I wish I was like that. Like
Yeah.
you're such a little ray of sunshine and like you're so kind and like, when people talk about you, they're like, "Oh, you're so this or that." And I'm like, "I want to be like that." And then I'm like, "Nah, that's not me. Like that just is what it is." Like that's but I think we totally get into a compare and that goes back to the right or wrong. Like it's
Mhm.
not right to be that the way of this person. I can appreciate her for who she is and I can really value what she brings in her unique blueprint. but I have to remember that like my uniqueness resonates with people too. And that comparison piece is it is kind of sticky because you get into the right or wrong. Like there's a right way to behave. There's a right.
Hmm.
And that's, I mean, we learn that as kids. Like if you're a girl, when you sit down, you cross your legs and like you
Hmm.
don't sit in a certain way. So I think it kind of stems back to what you were talking about with the right and wrong and just knowing that, and that's just back to the worthiness piece too, and just like being able to be who you are and express who you are and trust that those around you are going to receive it if it's in the interest of your highest and best good. And if they're not, they're going to join another herd. Because we all know that our horses for sure are just like they just are who they are and they trust that you're just going to be the same. And sometimes they get stuck with us because we have fences, but like for the most part, they're gonna find their own little herd members. And I like remembering because I am someone who will want to kind of like quiet my energy just because I've had like multiple people tell me that my energy is a lot. Like they'll be like, your energy is a lot, your energy is so high, or it's like staticky or whatever. And I don't know, man. I feel like I've learned a lot from my horses that like they just have to trust that I'm going to take care of myself because they're taking care of them. And it doesn't mean that we don't have compassion for each other. We're not like looking out for each other. We're just not trying to like be incongruent, I guess.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's been my whole life story. Like, who am I?
You just are.
You just are. I know. Like the Untethered book, how he's like, you're just the void, you're just the one inside of your head, inside of your body that's noticing the voice talking right now. Which is like such an interesting like concept to think about. You
Hmm.
know, someone told me the other day that they don't have a voice in their head, and I was like, "What? How do you not have a voice in your head?" And she's like, "Yeah, I couldn't resonate with the book because he was like, because so for those of you
Hmm.
who haven't listened, I'm talking about Michael Singer, Untethered Soul. It's a great book. Definitely listen if it feels good to you. He would say, like, there's a voice in our head that like we call somebody and they didn't answer, and we're like, huh, wonder why she didn't call back. Hope she's okay. Hope she didn't get in a car accident. Hope she's not mad at me. And like the voice goes, or like you look at a tree. Obviously, when you look at the tree, you understand that it's a tree, but our mind will be like, huh, that's a big tree and it looks like it might be dying and its leaves are kind of falling off. I wonder if it has a parasite. Like, all these little things where our mind goes. And he talks about like, who is that thinks those things? Like, what is that voice? It's your brain, but then it's who is it that notices it? Who notices that it's your brain? It's like such a cool thing to think about, just like that consciousness that's inside of us. And then he talks about like silencing that voice, but she was telling me that she just has like nothingness, like when she looks at something, she literally just like looks at it. And you know what's interesting about that too, like I'm a highly visual person, you're a highly visual person, most of a lot of my students are highly visual. She's someone who like can't close her eyes. Like if I were to say like close your eyes and visualize a red cube, you'd be able to like close your eyes and see the cube in front of you.
Hmm.
She can't form a single image in her mind when she closes her eyes, like not even the shape of it or anything. So I
Hmm.
wonder if that has anything to do with it. But also, I was like, wait, are you just enlightened? Because I feel like that's what they said. Like part of the enlightened stage is like being able to disidentify with that voice. So I don't know,
Hmm.
kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's interesting that both of those things are kind of closed off. Does she feel stuff?
Yeah, she feels stuff deeply in her body, but she also usually feels like her throat chakra is closed, which is kind of
Hmm.
interesting.
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting.
I know. Well, speaking of throat chakra, we're going to close this episode out. And that's all we have to say for today.
When the stream of thought just
Thanks for
stops,
listening. We
stops
do
for
want to
everybody.
know. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, actually. We want to know, like, how are you watering yourself down?
Hmm.
What is forgiveness to you? What does that feel like? Because I did ask in the membership, I was like, Is forgiveness just compassion and like consistently like finding compassion for yourself and others, or what is it? Maybe I don't even know what it is, so that's why I can't find it a lot of the times. I thought I was a forgiving person. I literally did, but I just realized there's a difference between being forgetful and forgiving. I just learned that like today.
I just forgot how mad I was at you until I saw you.
Yeah, I think thought I was forgiving, but I'm just forgetful. Damn. So let us know how things are going for you guys. We're happy to be back. We know we kind of have been MIA with our little duo podcast lately, but hopefully we'll be getting back at it. We're going to be together soon, and maybe we'll record a podcast in our
Ooh.
downtime or something like that, because that'd
Oh
be fun.
yeah, we should do that. We have
Yeah.
our Mustang retreat that is sitting with the Salt River coming up. We're gonna be together. And then also we have our Remember retreat. So we'll put the link for that in there. We'll just put all the information in the show
Yeah,
notes for
that's
you
going to be
about that.
awesome.
I'm
That's
out of words.
in
I'm out of words. We've been
July.
talking for like 2 hours. We're all tapped out today. But the information will be in that link. So if you're interested here in California in Aptos, embodying all the elements, putting things all together. Yes, there's horses involved. No, you don't have to bring yours. It's going to be magic AF. There's the recap. If you want the details, look in the link. All right. We will see you guys
See ya.
later.